got some bad news.
They're infected.
Infected? Yes!
Oh, I shouldn't have done that.
So 28 Years Later comes out later this week, and I figured I would take us back in time and review the first two movies before it comes out. So today, you're going to get the 28 Days Later review. Tomorrow will be the 28 Weeks Later review. And then later on in the week, when 28 Years Later comes out, I'll review that as well. So first, I got to take you back to a better time, the early 2000s. And within the early to mid 2000s, there was this kind of resurgence of zombie movies. In fact, there were so many damn zombie movies in the 2000s, you kind of just lost track of them. Every single week, it felt like another one was coming out, whether it was in the theater or direct to DVD. And also, this was kind of a new wave of zombie films, a different kind of zombie film, the very fast-running viral infection zombie movie, kind of films like this and the Paul Anderson Resident Evil movies that came out around the same time. Shortly later, there was the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead. Obviously, Romero came back with Land of the Dead, and just plenty of others, all leading up to, you know, The Walking Dead starting in 2010, kind of at the end of the decade of the 2000s. But yeah, zombie media just took over the 2000s. And the difference here with 28 Days Later that is often credited with starting the fast zombie trend. It's not technically the first fast-running zombie movie, I forget what is, but it definitely sparked interest in the fast-running zombies and also tackled a current, I think more modern fear that people had, and that's that, you know, infection, disease, viral outbreak, pandemic. And it sort of shows the evolution of the fear of zombies, because first zombies were associated with voodoo and they were undead that you could control and command. And then Romero came along and created the zombies rising from the grave, tons of variations of that. And now in the 2000s, we have the viral infection zombie, which is definitely playing on the fear of these outbreaks of diseases that could potentially happen in the world. Seeing the rise of things at the time, you know, there was swine flu and of course the AIDS pandemic before that. And so there was this very real fear that potentially there could be some kind of disease that would wipe out humanity at some point, that our immune system just would not be able to fight. And, you know, when you look at the history of humanity, we actually really haven't been around that long in comparison to how long our planet has existed. So you could say that, you know, humanity, we think that this is the status quo, this is the norm, that we're always meant to be here, but maybe that's not the case. Maybe humanity is going to have its time, and then whatever the next stage, the next evolution, the next era of life on this planet would be, humanity would be easily wiped out. And I think that that comes down to the fear of this movie, and even why it's called 28 Days Later, because the opening of the film shows this experimentation that is happening on these chimpanzees, these apes. A bunch of people break in to try to free the apes, but the apes are actually being experimented on with this disease that has this boost of rage and fury and endurance and all of this stuff, and it spreads like wildfire. They let one ape out, one person gets bit, almost immediately the virus takes over their body. That's another terrifying thing about this movie that it introduced too, is that the transition from human to zombie happens in the span of like 30 seconds. Like as soon as it gets into your bloodstream, you're just cooked. And that happens in the beginning of the movie, and then it cuts to 28 days later, and 28 days is all that it took for basically humanity to be wiped out by this disease. And this was a really big movie for me and my friend group back in the day. All of these zombie movies that I'm mentioning, this movie, the first two Paul Anderson Resident Evil movies, the Zack Snyder Dawn of the Dead, all of those films, me and my friends loved these movies. So I was a teenager when this movie came out, when the other movies came out, and we were like so on board with this type of film. So there definitely is a nostalgic value that I have to this movie too. And whenever I watch it, and it has been a long time since I rewatched it for making this review, it always kind of takes me back to that nostalgic place of being a young teenager with my friends and watching these crazy zombie movies. This film is directed by Danny Boyle, who did movies like Trainspotting, and he's also directing the 28 Years Later movie that comes out later this week. And it stars Cillian Murphy, who has now just won an Oscar for Oppenheimer, but 20 years earlier, He was facing down some viral infected zombies. Actually, this is the first movie with Cillian Murphy I think that I ever watched, and the first time you see him in this movie, he's butt-ass naked with his dick hanging out. So, yeah, the first time I ever saw Cillian Murphy, I saw his dick. He awakens in a hospital 28 days later after this event, has no idea what happened, and goes out into the streets of London to find it just absolutely desolate. Nothing is there. It looks like there has been remnants of battles and confrontations, and garbage is everywhere, debris is everywhere, cars are turned over. He has no idea what's going on. So he's just trying to survive, goes into a church, and one of the priests there is infected. That's the first zombie that he faces down, and he is just overwhelmed by this world that he is now inhabiting. The first two people that he runs into, Selena and Mark, they basically kind of just explain the scenario and what is going on to him. But what he doesn't realize is how quickly this virus spreads. And I think for me, the most shocking scene of the movie is these two characters that rescue him. When the guy gets infected, he gets the blood into a cut on his arm. Selena just grabs the machete and hacks the shit out of him. And it's like he hasn't even really turned yet. And that scene, I think, is so brutal and visceral. And you think that she's psychotic and out of her mind, but she knows that if you give this guy 30 more seconds, he's going to turn into one of the zombies and attack you. So she kind of has to do this. They don't have guns. She's got the machete. She does what needs to be done, but holy crap, that scene is crazy. And after the two of them team up, then they meet the next group of characters, which is a father played by Brendan Gleeson and his daughter, trying to keep her safe. And they decide to team up and go out and look for this radio signal that they've been hearing. And there's a lot of great sequences during this segment that I think are very, very well done. In particular, where they're driving in the underground tunnel and the car gets a flat tire and you see the zombies kind of running. You see their silhouettes, the shadows behind them. And the one shot that always freaked me out is the one that actually does make it to the car and just slams its face on the glass of the back of the car. Just stuff that you would never want to deal with in real life, especially when the characters are so, you know, they don't really have the proper tools to fight back. You know, they don't have a bunch of weaponry. They don't have body armor or anything to protect them, really. They are just scrambling to survive the best that they can. And in the third act, where they are rescued by soldiers and everything seems too good to be true, taken to this mansion where there's some food and some resources and at least kind of a barricade around it, well, things are not exactly what they seem, because part of the intention here is to have women for the soldiers to get out their frustrations and perhaps procreate with. And so this leads to the final confrontation of basically Cillian Murphy's character having absolutely nothing, being shirtless, tied up, taken out to be executed, and then has to strategically plan an attack on this mansion by using their resources against them, freeing one of the zombies, and also becoming pretty much a rage-induced zombie himself, having to take somebody out with his bare hands and become just as savage as this world has become. Even though he's not infected himself, there really isn't much of a difference at this point between his savagery and the savagery of the zombies. And this is just the new way of life. This is the new way of living, of what people have to become to survive in this world. But deep down, he still is able to retain his humanity and have hope for a future. Of what that future may hold, who knows, because we're going to get some sequels here. This movie also has a very distinct style with the way that it's filmed, which could rub some people the wrong way. Everything about it is very grainy and gritty, and it's meant to look that way. Like, it looks like it was filmed on a VHS camcorder in the 90s, even though it was a digital camera in the 2000s. And it can be a little bit difficult to get used to, but it is the distinct style of the movie, and it is what I remember the movie looking like. So even if you have it on Blu-ray, or I don't know what the 4K looks like if you're able to get your hands on it, if there is one. But yeah, it is meant to look grainy. It is meant to look heavily saturated. It is meant to look like sort of a film camera from the early 90s. And even though it's not the preferred style of filmmaking that I enjoy a more crisp, clean image on the screen. I do think that it adds to the benefit of this movie and gives it a signature style, and something that at this point I can't imagine the movie without. I feel like it has to look this way because otherwise it's not 28 days later. I don't think that it would have had the same effect if it were as crisp and clean as it possibly could be. I would hate to see every movie made this way, every horror movie made this way, but for 28 days later, I do think that it works and it adds, you know, a specific edge, a specific style to it. There's a artistic stamp that Danny Boyle puts on this movie, and I think a lot of that is because of the way that it's filmed, and I do appreciate that. It separates itself from the others and creates its own signature style, even though it's not a style that I would want to see replicated all the time. Overall, I do think this is a very enjoyable zombie film from the early 2000s and a defining 2000s zombie film. I think that this is definitely the signature, the standard of what was happening at the time and the type of zombie films that we were getting, the new wave, kind of the change into the viral infection, fast-running zombie style. I think that if you needed an example of that, just like if you needed an example of, you know, the origin of zombie films, you would go probably White Zombie, or if you needed an example of the zombies rising from the grave, you would go with Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead. I think that if you need an example of viral infected zombie movies, what movie do you pick? What movie do you choose? It's 28 Days Later. This is a movie that I highly recommend. If I had to pick any negatives out of it, it might come down to the way that it's shot at times, even though I say that, yes, that is the signature of the movie that makes it stand out. There are particular moments and particular scenes where, you know, the camera is very, very up close to things that are happening. I would like it pulled back a little bit more so I could just like understand the sense of space that we're in. I know that's not the style of the movie, so that's kind of like, I guess that's more of a nitpick than anything else. But besides that, I think the performances are good. I think the depiction of the viral infected zombies are good. I think it has a lot of great suspense, especially that tunnel sequence, as well as the finale with Cillian Murphy's character going back to the mansion, along with the score that is fantastic. They reuse it again in 28 Weeks Later, but holy crap, that score is amazing. I forget the name of the track. I looked it up, so it's either called the 28 Days Later theme or In a Heartbeat, but whatever you want to call it. It's also used in the movie Kick-Ass, which is interesting. But that theme, that score, just fan-friggin-tastic, and it's used amazingly both in this movie and 28 Weeks Later, but I'll talk about that movie tomorrow. As far as 28 Days Later goes, I think it's an essential 2000s zombie movie that people should check out. I think that the camera style might throw people off a little bit, but it has a lot of great things in there that I think that you can overlook that and get into it. I think once you get into like 15, 20 minutes in the movie, you're kind of just locked into the style and it's not, you know, too distracting after that. Cillian Murphy does a great job along with everybody else. Definitely highly recommend it. So yeah, guys, let me know what you think of 28 Days Later down below. When did you first see it? Did you see it young like I did during that boom, that new wave of zombie movies of the 2000s? Let me know. Tomorrow, I'll review 28 Weeks Later for you guys, and 28 Years Later will be later this week. So give the video a thumbs up, comment, help it out in the algorithm. Thanks as always for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you tomorrow.